Welcome back to A Considerate Life. As always, if you like this video, then give it a thumbs up. If you like the channel, then subscribe. As I said last time, today we're going to talk about what I call ideological eugenics and why the woke left are the new Nazis.
I don't think I can do this.
Musk? Of course you can.
Now, before that, I want to say a few things as a preliminary. I don't typically wax political on this channel. It's not what it's intended for, but as I said last time, one of my nieces, Kay, it's her birthday coming up, so this next 3 videos are in honor of Kay and her birthday and her very strong conservative political views. Now, before we dive into this political turn, I want to say a few things to my audience, such as it is. First of all, I don't like political philosophy. I've shied away from it my entire career. The reason is that the conclusions of political philosophy I find are so far downstream from other philosophical assumptions. So, for example, I have a friend, BJ, who studies critical theory, critical race theory. Critical theory is born largely out of Marxism. Marxism relies on a perspectivalism. I disagree with perspectivalism for epistemological reasons, right? And so I'd rather argue the epistemology side of things rather than critical theory. But the second thing is this. In my video on the theological virtues, faith, hope, and love, one of the things I said is that love is the acceptance of the existence of others. So I am a speciesist. I love human beings. Human beings are a creation of God, and they are to be accepted. If God didn't want them here, they wouldn't exist. So when it comes to people who may be on the opposite end of my political ideology, I've been working hard this year to not despise them for their bad ideas, and to love them for their human existence, right? So you can leave nasty comments in the comment section, but all that's going to do is it's going to give me a prompt to pray for you, and then God's going to start butting into your life, right? So although if you do leave nasty comments, you'll probably hurt my feelings temporarily. I mean, I'm not a robot.
I cannot verify that hypothesis.
And then if you responded to that comment that I'm not a robot, and then I showed the B-roll of Data, and your response was, well, Data's not a robot, he's an android. Welcome home, nerd. This channel's for you. Now, to refresh everyone's memory, eugenics was a movement in the 20th century that sought to purify by artificial means, by selective breeding, human traits, and to breed out traits that were considered inferior, detrimental, or otherwise undesirable. Some of those traits being alcoholism, poverty, criminality, insanity, epilepsy, things like that. And as we're all aware, historically, when the idea of eugenics was combined with a strong anti-Semitism with Hitler and his followers, it turned into the horrors of World War II and the Holocaust. Now, what I'm talking about today is an analogy off of that. When I say ideological eugenics, it's this notion. It's this notion that the woke left has deemed their view of man, their view of politics, their view of human sexuality as to be the only right way. And every other dissenting view is considered detrimental, inferior, and ideas to be exterminated. Currently, big tech and the woke left working together, it manifests in forms of things like censorship on social media platforms, by people being denied speaking privileges, or being shouted down in violent protests at college campuses just so that someone with an opposing view doesn't present those ideas on campus. And then some states right now are trying to keep Donald Trump off the ballot for the upcoming election because they just simply don't want people to have the opportunity to vote for him. Now, the thread here is the suppression of human freedom. In this case, the freedom of thought, the freedom to believe something and to say what you believe. Now, a couple of years ago, I watched a video with Michael Jai White. He's a well-known actor and martial artist. And I watched the original video of this where he confronts a number of white supremacists about their ideas in white supremacy. And so I want to go to that and just do in the middle of this talk, I want to do a short reaction video to Michael Jai White, because I think he models for us the kind of attitudes that we should have when it comes to dissenting ideas and how we should approach those.
My philosophy is like, hey, I like to be wrong, because every time I'm wrong, I learn something, right? So I have posed your issue, and you can teach me that I'm missing something. I'm all for it. Like there was a time I think I told you about the time where I was talking to it was about 10 white supremacists in a group, and I was excited to talk to them because I had never talked to any white supremacists before. They were passing out these cards, and it was around a bunch of people. They skipped me. I'm like, what was that about? And my white friend was like, no, you don't want to know. I'm like, no, let me check it out.
First of all, I like the fact that he distinguishes his white friend from the white supremacist. That's refreshing.
Turned out there's like this loyal order of what they go. I was like, oh shoot, they were about to get back in their van. I was like, yo, I stopped them to talk to them, right? Because I swear, I never met anybody like that, right? I didn't have no fear behind it because I know they're wrong. First of all, I already know that it's crazy, but I wanted to find out, how do grown men wind up spending their time on this much hate?
First of all, I love this level of curiosity. First, the courage of one's convictions. So we use this phrase, the courage of one's convictions. But what Michael Jai White is talking about really is courage. Basically, he's saying, I'm not afraid to listen to their opposing views because I know that whatever they say is going to be ridiculous, because there's so much, I think he says it here, there's so much proof that racism is just empirically unfounded. But he wants to understand, he's seeking to understand, and he does so without fear, probably because he's a huge black martial artist guy, so that helps.
They were like, hey man, you can't tell me that it is not more crime in the black communities than white communities. And I'm like, yeah, proportionally. Like if you're talking about like statistically, where we're coming from, a degradation and slavery and everything else, yeah, naturally things are going to change. But let me ask you a question. I said, where's the crime rate highest in the white community? In the trailer parks, in the the places where is low income and low education? They're like, yeah. And I said, well, let me ask you another question. Do you think rich black people or middle class black people rob and steal? They said no. I said, wait a second. Please repeat that. I said, you're saying that rich black people do not steal from each other. And they're like, no. I was like, I'm serious. Like, it freaked me out because I go, well, where's your racism? Because if what you're telling me is that crime is indicated, it's prevalent in the low income and undereducated communities, whether it's white or black. That's exactly what you're telling me. And silence. They're like,
okay, this is the first time where Michael Jai White says, basically, we'll come back to this, that they're making an argument. He brings up some counter evidence or a counterpoint, and there's silence.
What are you saying? So because if you were truly racist, you'd be saying rich black people rob from each other and rob other people because they can't help because it's in their genetic makeup. So these people thought they were holding up this racial thing when they were just talking about a statistic, but you're saying it's socioeconomic. And then I asked them a question. And sometimes your victory is just in the silence after you ask the question. I said...
Okay, that's the second time he references bringing someone to silence.
All black people don't rob from each other. I said, rich black people don't rob from each other. He said, right. I said, do rich white people rob from each other? Silence. There was this little moment where they went, right? Because he had to think about it. Not trying to put up a racial argument or whatever, but to get this person to think about it for a second, that little eye movement from like that was golden.
One of the things I like about this interview is Michael Jai White models for us a lot of things that are right and proper when it comes to a public expression of ideas. And here, I mean, one of the most hot button issues in America right now is the issue of racism, specifically white racism against African Americans. And Michael Jai White, in a context where these people are handing out pamphlets about white supremacy, he doesn't respond with violence, which he very well could. But what he does is he engages in dialogue, because I am sure that these guys had never had a conversation. And actually, I watched the original. I couldn't find it. I found this interview where White is talking about it. But in the original, when you actually see the interaction, the white supremacists are trying to say to Michael Jai White, well, you seem okay. And he stops him and he says, no, you can't say that. Your ideas won't allow you to say that I'm okay, but other people like me are not okay. The way he approaches his thought life is very well balanced, because he says, look, I like being wrong. My philosophy is I like being wrong, because if you present to me something that I hadn't thought of before, or new evidence that makes me change my mind and I get a little bit closer to the truth, then I just learned something. So I'm not afraid of being wrong. I'm also not afraid that if I believe I'm right, that somebody else is going to pick holes in my argument. Let's just have a dialogue about it. He literally has the courage of his convictions. He's unafraid of dissenting ideas. And then finally, he knows that there is victory in bringing someone from a boisterous presentation of false ideas to silence. That's a great first step for them. And it reminds me of a paper that I wrote in grad school when I was looking at Socrates as a teacher. I had a seminar on Plato, and we read through a bunch of Socratic dialogues. And what I noticed is that Socrates has a bunch of different kinds of interlocutors. And one of his interlocutors is a guy named Thrasymachus in the book, the Republic. And Thrasymachus is this brash, bold, and very ignorant interlocutor. And Socrates pins him down and responds to his brashness, his arguments. And what happens is Thrasymachus drops out of the dialogue. So I just think it's a great example of how things should be. Now compare that to the woke left. The woke left decides beforehand what they are and are not going to listen to. Dissent is not to be tolerated. It's to be purged. It's to be expunged from the public dialogue, both on social media, on college campuses, at the ballot box, right? Rather than a free market of ideas where it's survival of the fittest. If you can enter into the public square, make your case, give your arguments, and then allow your interlocutor to give their best arguments without slanting, without editorializing, without shutting them up or cutting them off, then you should do that. Now, going back to the analogy with eugenics, if you look at this chart, this triangle that's from a pamphlet of the original documents, they have education, environment, and heredity. And the assumption of the eugenics movement was that what you are, whether you're going to be a criminal or an alcoholic, rich or poor, was fixed not by your birth, but by the heredity that you inherited from your parents. And continuing the analogy forward, that is the big mistake of the woke left. The woke left considers their interlocutor fixed in their ideas. Well, if my ideas are wrong and I'm fixed, I'm immutable in holding to those ideas, then I can be nothing other than an enemy to be exterminated. Just this eternal opposition that has to be eradicated so that my good ideas can progress. But that is a mistake, because if you take Michael Jai White's approach, then what you have is you view your opponents as potential allies. Because if you can get them to see things the way you see them, if you can convince them, then you've won them over. Because people in their ideas are not fixed and immutable. They're malleable. They're changeable, right? And so until the woke left actually wakes up to see that their style of public discourse is toxic. And then combined with this recent rise in anti-Semitism, this is why I say the woke left really are the new Nazis, as much as that label has been placed on those on the conservative right. When we start to look at the methodologies and the preferred methodologies of the woke left, it is undeniable that the woke left really are the new Nazis in this ideological sense.